They called him the Diesel. Now, he's clearing some space at his house, and he's firing up that diesel one more time.
Crank up that diesel. Let's go, diesel.
Here comes the big guy.
Big John.
Look out, Killer. Here comes the diesel. It's there. Here he comes on 395.
Riggins is wearing him down.
That's right. He's starting to run.
If you hit him, you better hang on, because you're going to go for a ride.
Yeah, he's going to give you a little rider's right.
Well, those legs just keep churning and churning. Takes 2 or 3 people to tackle him.
John Riggins, the MVP. He wanted it, he got it, and he deserved it.
The work is done. Everything's in order. Finally, after over 60 years, so is the football life of John Riggins.
You're going to be a football player when you grow up.
Today is the best day of your life. Believe it.
He might be the finest quarterback produced in the last 10 years.
He's a day like this. That's all I need.
Fortunately for me, I didn't lose my life, didn't lose my job. Football convinced me that life is a team game.
Rest of your life. Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it.
I always daydreamed about being a mountain man. I wanted to always see the redwoods. I wanted to see the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to see the Painted Desert, the Petrified Forest, the Grand Canyon. That was like the land that I always wanted to go to and just go off into the wilderness and make my way.
The Riggins house was small, but Centralia, Kansas had plenty of open fields for the 3 boys, Frank, John, and Bill. Yet it just wasn't big enough for John.
You know, I grew up in Stylog 13. Everything is in barbed wire. Every 160 acres, basically, was surrounded by barbed wire, and inside that was more barbed wire to separate different fields. I think psychologically, I've always felt somewhat maybe imprisoned. And of course, my dad made a good warden, there's no question about that.
Frank Riggins Sr. had few opportunities as a child. The former Marine was determined that his boys would. He went by his middle name, Gene, and while he was the toughest on his middle son, John, all 3 feared him.
He didn't ever really share love with you. More than anything, it was never good enough. You know, you're never good enough at what you're doing in sports.
Frank Jr. was plenty good enough. He was Gene's favorite. Junior set the state record in the 100-yard dash, was the starting quarterback at Centralia High, and one of the best pitchers in Kansas.
I was, Ed McMahon to Frank's Johnny Carson. He was called Hawkeye, was one of his nicknames, the old pro. Me, I was Fatso. So there was discrepancy right there too, fatty, fatso, tubby. I mean, my mom would say it with love, of course, but still, it's not a good self-image. When we were growing up, we'd always race, and Frank would beat me, but he'd only beat me by about a yard. He'd always beat me by a step, and I'm giving up 2 years to him. But the old man never factored that in. He didn't grade on a curve. You're still number 2, Fatso.
Me and him had our issues. I don't even really know what the issues were, but there were. So we just kind of went our separate ways. And that has changed, which I'm really tickled about.
While Junior walked in lockstep with his father, John danced to a different drum. He was more like his mother, Millie. He played the sousaphone in the band and loved to run. But he found that even a wide-open track was too small for him.
I was like a double wide. I almost needed 2 lanes compared to everybody else was in the race. And they're going, who in the hell is that guy down there running in lane 3? My God, what's he doing here?
By his senior year, John was a muscular 220 pounds. He wasn't Riggo yet, but he wasn't Fatso anymore. He became the pride of Nemaha County and the new state record holder in the 100.
The more I think about it, it's been so long, but it was kind of nice to see the 9.8 beside Frank's 9.9.
A 100-yard football field suited him best. There was lots of open space, and when Junior left, an open spot at quarterback.
He was the only guy I ever held out of practice because he ended up hurting too many of his own players. And I remember even getting in an argument with Gene, and Gene would say, Junior's going to make it, Junior's going to go to college, Junior's going to do this, Junior's going to do that. And I said, Gene, Junior is a great high school player. He's going to be a great college player. But John is the one that's going to be playing pro football someday.
Riggins led Centralia to a championship. In his last game, he left no doubt that he was the best player in the family and all of Kansas.
He rushed for over 400 yards, threw for 80 or 90, and he scored 37 points. He was just unbelievable.
John's talents could have taken him far away to college. Instead, he found himself right next to his father in nearby Lawrence. He'd play for Pepper Rogers at Kansas.
It was that choice that, you can go anywhere you want to, fat boy, but, along with the University of Kansas. That was the tacit understanding, I think.
Junior was already there.
They were both the same kind of guys, tough, solid, really good football players. John was just a little bigger.
The two played together for one season. Gene watched them carefully.
Here I was actually accomplishing quite a bit in my own right, and it was swept off the table to deal with the fact that Frank wasn't getting his carries. He wasn't getting enough in the spotlight. So yeah, it wasn't, it was just another, I was just looking forward to having a beer after the game. That's all I wanted.
After Frank graduated, John rushed for over 1,100 yards his senior season and broke nearly all of Gale Sayers' records. Finally, John would get to see the country. Riggins was headed for the Big Apple. In 1971, a telegram arrived at the Riggins house from head coach Weeb Eubank. John was the first-round pick of the New York Jets.
His afro really stood out to begin with. And John, when he walked, he had a little bop to him. And besides that, he had the booty out there. So the brothers on the team decided, they just knew that John had a little blood in him, and so they nicknamed him Chocolate Chip.
It didn't take long for Joe Namath to learn that John was also a chip off the old block.
Sitting around in a bar in New York, a tavern, and his dad dipped snuff and I dipped snuff, and I had a little spit glass. And I'd have my drink here and I'd be spitting in my glass, and I'm watching his dad. His dad never spit. And I said, what do you do? He swallowed the tobacco. I said, wow, this cat is tough, man, And I just inferred that, this is John's daddy. And I see where John got to be a tough guy and to do things his way, too.
In just his second season, Riggins gained nearly 1,000 yards. His size was obvious. His speed, however, kind of snuck up on you.
You're moving along, you're running 65 or 70, which is a good speed. But this big tractor trailer pulls up beside you and just blows by you. That was Riggins.
What I didn't have a good set of brakes. So for me to start downshifting that load and making it do, I had a little bit of a wrinkle, but not much. The smaller you get, the more of you I can take. Not that I'm going to shoot for it, but if you happen to get in my way, then that's where it's going to go. And I like in my running style. It's kind of like growing up on a farm, not on a farm, but having cattle and being around cattle. You know, there would always be one or two in the herd. They weren't like the other docile cattle. They were a little aloof. Eventually, though, you had to get them all, you know, into the pen to load them up to take them to another pasture or whatever. You take that one critter out there that was on his own and you started condensing his space, you were going to get that space to where he no longer felt comfortable and it was too tight and he was coming out. He's going to run to daylight, that critter will, and that's all I did. I'd find that spot, and that's kind of what it was like. You squeezed me down enough, then I was going to have to turn and you know, make my move, and that's kind of what it was.
In 1973, his third season with the Jets, John made his boldest move.
You know what? I always wanted a mohawk haircut, but my parents would not let me have one. So I said, hell, I'm going to get myself. So I just started growing it out. That was basically kind of, okay, folks, there's a new shooter here. And I'm sure, you know, the message was intended for my dad.
Once overshadowed by Frank and overlooked by his father, Riggins now felt ignored because of Namath.
As long as Joe is in town, there'll not be a 1,000-yard rusher because we throw the ball.
In 1975, his fifth season in New York, John played without a contract and did rush for 1,000 yards.
I realized in that moment that physically speaking, my talents were well beyond Joe's talents. So then I realized that, well, this isn't, what am I doing here? This doesn't make sense because it's always going to be about Joe. And rightfully so. He's the one that made a name for himself, and I liken it to the Westerns. As long as Joe was going to be in town, you know, I was going to have, you know, he was the sheriff and I was the bad guy, and he was kind of figuratively telling me that if you know what's good for you, you'll be on the noon stage.
Coming up.
He gave everything any player could ever give in that particular game. And I believe that that defeat was so crushing to him that he walked away.
When I was growing up in Kansas, I was always second fiddle to my older brother Frank. And then when I went to New York, it certainly felt like I was second fiddle to Joe. But then when I came down to Washington, I wasn't even a fiddle.
That's because Redskins head coach George Allen pulled the strings. He was a defensive mastermind who thought little of fullbacks.
They had a system basically that was really built around the halfback. So I looked and I went, man, the fullback does a lot of blocking here. So in the back of my mind, but I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm Joel Riggins. I mean, I just gained 1,000 yards. Nah, they wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, they would do that. I was actually a damn good blocker in college, and it's something you lose your taste for if you're a running back. It ain't really in your best interest. So anyway, I became a blocking back for George Allen, period, end of story. There was no ifs, ands, buts, or words about it, and I was not happy.
John hated it. John even went to George Allen one time and said, hey, why don't you give me a 60 number? Since I'm going to only get the ball once or twice a game. You know, John was a little frustrated with George Allen.
Jack Pardee replaced Allen in 1978, and Riggins had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. the Redskins faced Dallas in the season finale with the division title on the line. Riggins rushed for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns.
He gave everything any player could ever give in that particular game. I remember handing the ball off up the middle and watching John bear out to the right and run up the sidelines like a 60-yard touchdown run. I mean, the safeties had angles on him, and he outran the angles. He was unbelievable in that football game.
John Riggins, 66 yards and a Redskin touchdown.
In the final minutes, Roger Staubach threw 2 touchdown passes. The Redskins lost a playoff spot by a single point.
I mean, after that, I was pretty much defeated. And it looked back on it, and there was a lot of things going on, but to me, it was kind of like, well, okay, this is as good as it's going to get.
That defeat was so crushing to him that he walked away. I've got nothing more left in the tank to be able to help this football team win.
At the age of 30, John Riggins retired. He went back home to Kansas.
I have resigned my position of fullback for the above corporation effective 1:00 p.m. Sunday, July 27, 1980. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Signed, John Riggins.
John Riggins sat out the entire 1980 season. The following year, Joe Gibbs was hired as head coach of the Redskins. He went to Kansas to try to convince John to come back.
I meet him at the back door. I've got a Budweiser in each hand. And Joe goes, by the way, this isn't good when you're on a job interview. I would not recommend this to anybody. Meeting the boss with a beer in each hand, but me being me. So, you know, I drank my beer and I drank Joe's, and we sat down and we had breakfast, and then, you know, we discussed a few things.
He leaned across the table and he goes, "You need to get me back there. I'll make you famous." He went just like that, you know. So I'm looking like this, I'm looking at the guy and I go, in my mind I'm going, oh my gosh, this guy's an egomaniac. I'm gonna get stuck coaching a nut for 10 years. And honestly, I think in the back of my mind, I said this, I said, I'll get him back, I'll trade him, I get rid of the fruitcake, I'll trade him for a first. This is perfect. And 2 days later, I get a phone call and it's John. And he goes, "Joe, there's only one thing I won't put in my contract." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "A no trade clause." Now, I tell everybody, somebody up there was looking out after me.
Well, I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back. Guys are, you know, they're just like they've always been. It's almost like I hadn't been gone. And I'm getting kind of tired of just running up and down the field by myself. But, you know, after laying off this long, as that Wild Mountain Man said, and it better be good.
Gibbs unleashed Riggins. He wasn't a beautiful runner. He was a powerful runner. But his power was beautiful to watch.
I had the perfect angle that every cameraman would die for, to be able to see him go through holes, to see him use his ability, his quickness, his athletic ability. He was just everything you want in a great big running back. You didn't hit John, John hit you. I can't ever recall somebody putting John on his back. That just wasn't going to happen. No one would take John on because it was all shoulder pads, giant thigh pads, and knees. And he was a relentless trainer. I mean, yeah, he ran hard off the field, but he was always the last guy running gassers, trying to get, I'm sure, something out of his system and get himself into shape.
As always, John did it his way.
Called and asked, "Hey, can we work out early tomorrow?" I said, sure, what time? And he said, well, I need to be in a duck blind in Baltimore before the sun comes up. So I said, how about 3:30? And he said, sure. And 3:30 he was there. We had a cup of coffee and turned the music up. And from the beginning to the end, he just went at it and went duck hunting.
After practice, Riggo would herd his offensive linemen into the Redskins' equipment shed.
5 o'clock club was a means for the select few to get together, solve a lot of world's problems over a couple of 12-ounce curls. We even had a president. It was self-anointed. It was John. He called himself El Presidente.
Yeah, it was self-appointed. I was self-appointed with no elections. I fancied myself as that guy, you know. I was the one that kind of, needled everybody. But it was always about fun and games. It wasn't we were in there, mapping out strategies of what we were going to do on Sunday. It was a social hour.
John's the character of the characters that were a part of that football team.
I've been a bad boy.
He's the lead act.
Riggins, John, knucklehead.
John wasn't afraid to buck the establishment. John wasn't afraid to do something out of the ordinary. If the band was playing, John had his own drums that he was beating on.
I do have a drinking problem, but that's only when I'm hanging from the rafters by my knees.
I think that the biggest misconception is that he is a clown, and he's not a clown. He's a showman instead, and he knows intuitively the right thing to do, and yet do it in a colorful way.
Football was never my life. Interesting. The guys, the relationships were my life. I have an ability to be able to relate to damn near everybody, and I've sat beside a sitting president at dinner and, been around vice presidents and been around vice presidents who became presidents. And at the same time, you used to hang out with the equipment guys. I take on all comers, basically.
Here's a bunch of naughty boys and girls. I've got plenty of coal in my bag for everybody.
It wasn't there was anything foreboding about my intentions that I had ulterior. It was always pure, and it was always in the vein of having fun and making them laugh. So I think that's why it works that way, and that's what I do. That's how I give back.
The fans loved him right back, and in 1982, Riggo gave them everything he had.
Well, they love him here in Washington. Now listen to the crowd as they root for the big fullback.
Yellow 44! Yellow 44!
After 5 non-winning years in New York and a heartbreaking defeat in Dallas in 1979, the time had finally come for John Riggins.
The stage was being set. Finally, I'm getting the opportunity. The only thing I've really ever wanted outside of getting a paycheck, this is what you play for. An opportunity to get to the Super Bowl.
Riggins had never started in a playoff game before, so he did something he'd never done before. He went to Gibbs and said, "Load the wagon. Give me the ball."
You didn't hear from John Riggins, "Oh, give me the ball, I can make a difference." When John made a statement like that, it's like, oh, let's all sit up in our chairs a little bit and listen, because that means that he's ready to go. Yeah, give him the football.
He went to Joe Gibbs and said, "Coach, I want to carry the ball."
Boom, we fly off the ball. Get into your guy and get him turned a little bit and out of the way, because when Riggo was coming through, he'd take all three of you.
In the first round of the playoffs, the Diesel ran for 119 yards, then topped that total the next week against the Vikings.
When everybody else on that playing field is growing weary, that's when Riggins really kills you. Tell you, once he gets rolling, brother, you better jump on him and wait for some help, or you're going to go for a little ride.
Riggins' final stats that day: 37 carries, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 memorable bow.
So I'm coming off the field, the crowd, there's just this crescendo as it gets louder and louder. And all I could, I just stopped and I thought, well, I should acknowledge this. So I took my helmet off and, and I crossed my arms and I bowed. But it was just that spontaneous moment. It felt like the right thing to do.
He gets a big hand and he makes a big bow. A little showbiz.
An earlier loss to the Cowboys had made Riggins quit the game. 3 years later, he faced them again. This time, a trip to Super Bowl 17 was at stake.
Riggins barrels straight ahead and carries 4 or 5 Cowboys with him.
Guys going backwards, then you give it to that big fullback right in behind you.
The Diesel rumbled for 140 yards and totaled a record 610 in the 82 postseason.
And to Riggins, dives forward, touchdown, John Riggins.
And the Redskins have won it 31-17, and they go to the Super Bowl.
He's with us tonight. He's happy, he's jolly, he's by golly. Here's Brother Ringo, he's with us tonight.
We got to the Super Bowl. Junior and I, or Frank and I, were together with John, and it was just a moment of knowing that he got to the place he wanted to be.
I wasn't thinking about the Dolphins. I wasn't sitting there going, because I'm a running back. I didn't know what was going to happen on Sunday afternoon, and I love improv. You snap the ball, you give it to me. You guys do whatever you got to do. I'll figure it out. Be in the moment.
Against the NFL's #1 defense, Riggins rushed for a then Super Bowl record, 166 yards, and was named MVP. His moment came in the fourth quarter, with the Redskins trailing and 42 yards of open space in front of them.
We all know what's going to happen. The inevitable is this. I'm going to get the football, and I'm going to either go this way or I'm going to go that way. So you've got to, like Dirty Harry. Do you feel lucky today?
Let's go. Goal line, goal line. I left tight wing, 70 chip on white. Ready?
Here comes the Diesel. Here comes the Diesel.
Yellow 41! Yellow 41! Hunt!
There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35, the 30, the 20. He's gone. He's gone. Touchdown, Washington Redskins. 42-yard touchdown run on 4th and a foot. John Riggins has given the Redskins the lead in Super Bowl 17.
It was awesome. It was awesome exactly the way the word was meant to be used. And it was 100% pure exhilaration.
Joe Gibbs, the Hogs, and MVP John Riggins have beaten the Miami Dolphins 27-17.
It was, well, you could say figuratively it was orgasmic.
Still to come.
Everybody's at the party and you don't leave. It's all and so just so Connor's getting ready to leave, and of course that's when the now famous words, "Loosen up, Sandy, baby." Hickory, about as good a firewood as you can get. Now there's easier ways to do this, but these are Swedish splitting malls made by hand in a hand forge. Hard to beat. You could actually shave with this thing.
John Riggins is in his 60s, but he's as strong as a man in his 20s. Even more amazing, what he did in his 30s. Riggins gained more yards in his 30s than he did in his 20s. At the age of 34, he ran for a career-high 1,347 yards and a then-record 24 touchdowns. Two years later, Riggins retired, but he continued to leave his mark in Washington.
Well, I'd been with a good friend of mine most of that afternoon, having a few beers. Got home, put on my tuxedo, didn't bother to eat, went down to the hotel where the party was, walk in, and I don't know why, because I really hardly ever drink it, but I had a double scotch. He says, "Gubernator." And then I had another one. "I understand that we're going to be seated at the same table tonight."
There were 2 bottles of red wine, and John, in a very expressive mode, managed to mow both of them down.
They bring dinner. By now, it's like I'm already past the point of no return. And I said, I'm not hungry. So I continued to drink my dinner.
So they put 2 more bottles of red wine also within John's reach, and somehow managed to knock them over. So at this point, the table is now covered with red wine.
We'd been told early on that Justice O'Connor was going to have to leave early. But by now, you get into that frame of mind where everybody's at the party and you don't leave. It's all and so Justice O'Connor's getting ready to leave. And of course, that's when the now famous words, "Loosen up, Sandy, baby." And basically, it was me saying, "Don't go, come on, we're going to have a lot of fun." And then it was, boom, timber. I got to tell people it looked like an 18-wheeler jackknifed on the interstate.
And he just went back without a sound. And he stayed there for the entire speech.
I guess instead of making a commotion, they just left me there till the party was over and the lights came up and they helped me to my feet. And I rode off into the sunset.
It was a great evening, as far as I was concerned, one of the most memorable that I can remember in Washington because of the way that it played out and the fact that everybody enjoyed it.
What did I think of it? I think there's 2 schools of thought on that. Some people think it's fabulous. Other people are like, "Oh my God, this guy's crazy." I thought it was fabulous. I thought it was the guy that I would want to meet and hang out with.
At the time, Riggins was dealing with a difficult divorce. His new space was a trailer on the Potomac until a storm washed it downriver. Lisa Marie helped rescue it and John.
He had this reputation for being a drunk, a partier, and just a big galoot. Anybody who's ever ultimately worked with John or spent more than 5 or 10 minutes with John understands that this is somebody who not only survived a tremendously violent career at a high level, but has a tremendous intelligence and a tremendous loyalty, and will always do the right thing.
I don't know where or what I'd be doing right now had I not met my wife, Lisa Marie. She's given me the ability to trust. I've never had that before. And that's a pretty big thing in a human's life, I think, trust.
Soon, they upgraded from the trailer to an abandoned warehouse where Lisa Marie continued John's restoration.
At the warehouse, he had a doorstop, and the doorstop was his Super Bowl MVP trophy, and it was tarnished, and it was black, and it was dented. So when we got married, I finally got permission to have it restored.
They moved to New York, were married by Rudy Giuliani, and had 2 daughters. John studied acting. As a football star, he was used to the stage. It was a space where he'd always felt free to be himself.
It's more than that. Why, it's freedom itself. You can blow your top out here and nobody cares.
I won't go back.
To jail? Have you been in jail before?
Prison camp in Nam. I was a POW. I won't be locked up again.
Riggins' most memorable curtain call came in Washington, when he was surprised with a dozen roses from none other than Sandra Day O'Connor. He took his final bow in 1990. The Redskins were adding his name to their ring of fame.
I'm standing on the 50-yard line in my suit like a broken-down old football player should be, but there's no John. You know, John's supposed to be here next to me because our names are going up on plaques. And then all of a sudden, the crowd starts to get restless, and it starts to get louder and louder and louder. And out of the Redskin dugout comes John in full battle regalia.
John Riggins. Who else?
Waiting for him were the mother he was so much like, and the father he so wanted to please.
He looks good. He looks like he could still play, doesn't he?
I remember running out there and Theismann's looking at me with this quizzical look on his face. He's going, John, why? And I told him, I said, I had to hear it just one more time.
Up next.
All right, guys, let's go. Oh, let's show everybody their Olympic skeet shooting skills. Put. All right, I'm ready. Come on, let's see what a great shot you are. I believe your nickname growing up was Hawkeye, if I'm not mistaken.
Hawkeye, it's
That's
better.
because of the way you shot a basketball, not a shotgun.
Yeah, well, what the hell. That was a few moons ago.
Come on around over here, Franco, and we'll get in the Riggabago.
Oh, there it is, the Winnebago.
1 bottle, 3 glasses, let's go.
There we go.
Frank and Bill Riggins recently met up with John and his camera crew to film an episode for his new outdoor show called Riggo on the Range.
How do you like the Riggabago? Not too bad, is it?
Good accommodation. And you guys have been all over the western part of the United States with this little booger, right?
Southwest, and then the Midwest. Yeah, we got an elk hunt with a former teammate of mine, Clint Didier.
The Riggins boys returned to their hometown to shoot the bull and some clay pigeons.
All right, guys, let's go. Oh, let's show everybody your Olympic skeet shooting skills.
There is a match on, as they call it, or is this just shoot and have some fun?
I'm not going to put any pressure on myself, guys. I do a show, an outdoor show. You know, whatever happens, I'll shoot what I have to do.
Loser has to buy a beer tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say, I think I'll just go to the liquor store now.
Pull.
Nice shooting, Franco.
All right.
Pull it. Man, I ain't hit nothing yet. All right, Bill, good job. All right, I'm ready.
Bill, Frank, and John weren't back in Kansas just to shoot skeet for John's show. They also returned to the high school for John's Hall of Fame plaque ceremony. So did nearly all of Centralia, who came to honor one of their own, Gene and Millie's boy. That wild kid. That wonderfully different kid.
When I look back on my career, I think of my mom and dad, a young couple that came here, mid-40s, I think it was, started a family. between the two of them, had the DNA to produce 3 exceptional athletes. And I know that that was their dream. It wasn't always necessarily my dream. I like spending most of my time down here at the creek trying to catch bullheads and bluegills. And I had an older brother who was an exceptional athlete when he went through here, and he set the bar at a certain level. It made me get the most out of what talent I had. And in doing so, I passed the legacy on to my younger brother. So ultimately, it gets back to understanding that everybody's part of a big family here. And if you find yourself in a situation where you need somebody to help you out on a 4th and 1, I'm still the guy to see. Thank you very much.
You can find John's name everywhere. In Lawrence, at the University of Kansas. In Washington. And of course, at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton. And today, not just John's name, but the entire Riggins family name sits above Centralia's football field. That's where their parents never missed a game, and Junior, John, and Bill all started their football lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Centralia High School and the Panther football program, we would like to dedicate the football field to the Riggins family, and therefore christen it as Riggins Field.
From our family to yours in the city of Centralia, I'd like to express our deepest gratitude. To think that this field will be remembered as long as there's a Centralia Panther team at Riggins Field is quite an honor. Thank you. You know, we've talked a lot about my career, my upbringing, my father, my mother. But one thing that I don't think I've expressed, and I would be remiss if I hadn't, was that I love my dad. I wanted to be him. And in some ways I am. So I would never want a mixed message here, because I know my brothers feel the same way, and it's kind of funny when you get back and you see your brothers, then you see your same mannerisms in them, and you realize it's not you, it's your father. So that's it. And I know that Mom and Dad, there's a moment that had they been living, they would have really meant a lot to them. And therefore it means a lot to me.
The issues that once entangled him are now gone. John is at peace with his father and close to his brothers. He's finally found a comfortable space at home.
I put in, there's 123 emerald green arborvitaes, about 12 to 13 feet tall. They got about a 40-inch root ball on them, and they weigh about 1,200 pounds. Had some help with the first 41. The last 82 I planted by myself. And yeah, there's a nice straight string of them, and you know, they're not perfect, but they're straight and they're true. To me, there's order there. There's been some interesting times and some bumps along the way, for sure. And a lot of it created by me. And now, you know, with Lisa Marie, the girls, there is order. And there is peace in the valley.